This is Channel 5, KTLA, Los Angeles.
Channel 5 presents Movies Till Dawn for your late-night entertainment. Tonight, The Deadly Mantis, starring Craig Stevens and William Hooper.
Welcome to Movies Till Dawn, a new podcast that's a safe space for filmmakers to talk about the fascinating and exasperating and always unusual and never quite the same thing twice process of creating motion pictures. I'm Raymond and I'm exhausted. This is part 2 of a conversation I had with my friend and compadre and collaborator, Andy Garcia. And he talks about a lot of interesting things here. We talk about Francis Coppola. We talk about Andy's beautiful movie, The Lost City. We talk about his movie with James Gandolfini in it, with Sidney Lumet, directed Night Falls on Manhattan. But before we get into any of that, I talked at the beginning of the previous conversation about how I met Andy and how we got our movie City Island launched. We crossed paths once before. What I'm talking about is the 63rd Academy Awards, which was held on March 25, 1991, at the Shrine Auditorium. And a lot of cool movies from that year were nominated. Reversal of Fortune, Godfather III, The Grifters, and Dances with Wolves, which took all of it. And it's kind of amazing to look at, they were all Hollywood movies. They were all studio movies, I'm pretty sure. But one of the best short films of the year was my AFI graduate film, Bronx Cheers. To my astonishment, we got nominated for a Best Live Action Short Film. And so my producer, Matthew Gross, and I wound up going to the ceremony. And Andy was there. We didn't meet each other. I just always think it's sort of funny in retrospect that, how we crossed paths. Andy was nominated for Best Supporting Actor. The first thing that's weird is we get out of the limo and everyone takes our pictures and screams at us like we're important. We're like one of the nominees for Best Short Film, but nobody cares. They just know that you're getting out of the limo and you're in the tux, so you must be somebody. Right away, it was like bad LSD. Also, it's like at 3 p.m. At least it was then. So, the whole thing is just off, and the limo, and we're 25 years old, and everyone thinks we're someone who we're not. But, it's the Oscars. Aren't we happy to be there? Well, of course we were. So we get inside, and finally the whole thing begins. And what's hard to understand, and I don't know if it still works this way, but it probably does, is... Of course, you're all excited to be there if you're nominees, but once the categories start being announced and winning, like 4 out of 5 people lose, and the energy in the room changes. Like very soon, you just feel this really negative, disappointing thing going on in the room. And how can you help it? Like people, they build up their whole life, they get to the Oscars, and right away, everyone's losing. It just happens. And I noticed, and we were still a few awards back then. The live action was pretty early in the program, but we were still 5 or 6 awards in, and I started seeing that when categories lost, people left. They did not sit there. And I thought, that's strange. Like, because we're at the Oscars, you're supposed to stay because you're a good sport, and this is all comradeship, and this is how we support each other as artists. Bullshit. You get out of the room. You don't want to sit there. You lost. I'm going to sit there for another 2 hours and watch this crap? Like, I lost. And now I got to deal with everyone calling me going like, you should have won. You know what's going to happen, So I thought, well, no, this is just bad sportsmanship, And then our category came up and we lost. I can't say that I was like heartbroken. I was shocked that we were there at all. But once you lose, like the energy goes out of it. You're just, so it only took another couple of categories. And I looked at my producer and friend and I was just like, really? And he said, no, let's go to the bar. So we left too. Now what they did, because you're on TV, is they had these stand-ins. And they were in tuxes, standing by, because clearly this happened every year. So as soon as you left your seat, quickly 2 people took your seat wearing the tux, and so it wasn't a tragedy for you to leave for the Oscar telecast. It just looked like there were still a bunch of people in tuxes sitting there. They didn't really notice that I left. And I realized then that by the end of the night, when you get to the really important things, the best director and stars and actors and actors, there's 60-70% of the audience are stand-ins applauding. Everyone was at the bar. And they weren't happy. It wasn't like there was any fun going on at the bar. They were pissed, That's the end of my Oscars story. It's not, it didn't, listen, did it have a happy ending? Yes. Every time my name is in print in a little article about something I'm trying to do, it always says, Academy Award nominee Raymond D. Flett. Well, this was like 30 years ago for my 20-minute film. But if I do get a proper obit when I die, it'll be Oscar-nominated filmmaker. And it all goes back to that night where Andy Garcia was also there. I know we didn't meet each other on that night, but it took a while, but eventually we did, and I'm glad we did. Here's part 2 of my conversation with Andy Garcia.
Francis is everything in one, in a sense. To me, Francis is like if there was, if you went to Mount Olympus of film directors, Francis would be Zeus, because he has not because necessarily because he's better than the other guy. It's just his nature. He's like a professor, and to me, in the experience I had, the way he talks about the way he sets up a scene before you even go into it, and the historical elements of it, and he talks all the way around, like if you're doing a play, and he sets you up. Like I remember when we were doing the sequence at the end with Godfather 3, he said it was an homage to the Red Shoes, and Michael Powell, and why it was, and that movie inspired him to think about doing this sequence with the opera and the shooter and all that as one set piece. But Francis is very, he's very intuitive with his actors. He taught me a thing which was I still use to this day, because we worked about it, where he used to say, actors, you do the scene, and after a while he'd go, actors free take. And he just wanted you to,
So that's where that came from,
Yeah.
because you say it.
Yeah.
And guess what? I say it now.
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
Yeah, it's great. And they're delighted.
They're delighted.
Yeah, actors free take, do whatever you want.
Yeah. And one time he said, sometimes I even do editor's free take, which is the actors play the scene without any dialogue at all.
That's interesting. I just heard about that from someone who had worked with Gus Van Sant, and he calls it the silent take.
Right.
Let's do one now without dialogue. I thought that was just brilliant.
Yeah.
Does that work? I mean, is it?
Yeah, because they can cut to you at any point. The editor can cut to you at any time. You know what I mean? My daughter Daniela, which just finished doing a movie with Gus Van Sant. Yeah.
Oh, I didn't know Danielle was in a movie. Yeah.
Yeah. Just this last one with Joaquin Phoenix.
Right.
He's a wonderful director, very humanist, behavioralist. But Francis is an extraordinary, in all aspects of storytelling. He was just, he's, like I said, he's Zeus.
Yeah.
He's and he cares about young people and young artists. One time we made a movie with Richard Wenk, writer director friend of mine. The first movie I produced with him, with me as a producer and him as
Just a Ticket.
Yeah. And we sold it to MGM, and we sold it to Francis, who was on the board. We sold it to UA. He was on the board, and Frank Sr. wanted Francis to see it, and he came in and he spent the entire night with Richard, just to say, you want to review the movie, see if there's any different alternative way of ending it or whatever. And he said, meet me over here. And he spent the entire night, I'm talking about to the early morning hours, with Richard in the cutting room. He wanted to see he watched the assembly of the film, and then he started to reassemble the movie with him and say, how do you want to start the movie? He goes, I'd like to start over there. He goes, okay, put that scene over there. Now, where do you want to go? He goes, well, I'd like to go over there. He goes, you want to go over there? Where else do you think you could go? And he just kind of, and at the end of the day, the movie stayed the way it was.
Right.
But he showed the possibilities of things that if you take things out or if you move them around, how they can empower a film. Like just like he talks a lot about what happened in the Godfather Part II, about that initially it was intercut, the present and the past, many more times. And he said the movie wasn't really ever working well enough. And then it wasn't until they cut in bigger chunks that the movie really took off for him. He's, to me, he along with Hal, I would say, are my two greatest inspirations, as directors, in very similar ways. If you think about it, they kind of come, although Hal was older than him, they both have this sort of experimental, push the envelope kind of framework in what they aspire to. I mean, Francis always says that he just wanted to make little independent movies, that he got sucked into the Godfather world.
Yes, he makes it out as if like the Godfather was his big sellout.
Yeah,
I'm always so surprised when he says things like
he had to. I think the company was broke. He was broke. I mean, everyone said, Francis, if you don't go do this movie, we're gonna have to shut Zoetrope down.
Yeah, and they're great, miscasting ideas that the movie started with. Ryan O'Neal was going to be James Caan, and Kirk Douglas was going to be Marlon Brando or something like that. It started.
They didn't want Brando in the movie at all. He snuck in a screen test and didn't even recognize him.
Right.
Yeah, all those stories are great, and they're all documented in a documentary that comes along with the film.
Two epics. And now, Paramount Pictures presents the continuation of Francis Ford Coppola and Mario Puzo's legendary saga.
Like in the mid-'80s or early '80s, there was like this rumor of Godfather III.
Right.
And I thought, And there was a rumor there was a young guy, which eventually I guess was the part that I ended up playing. But I remember as an actor thinking, as every actor in the world probably thought, it wasn't just me going, oh, that's the part. That's my part. I got to play that part. I was such a Godfather 1 and 2 fanatic. Still I am. But I wasn't alone. Everybody was, But I, like most actors will talk about films. Somehow I had this deep connection to it, and anyway, so they were mentioning Stallone and Travolta and all this, and I'm going, well, I was really just an actor off the street. I hadn't done anything, and a bit part here and there. I was doing improvisational theater at the Comedy Store in the house group there, just trying to make my way in town, I didn't really have an agent. And anyway, so that went away, it didn't happen. And then I was doing internal affairs. And I had done I had done The Untouchables and Black Rain. Then they wrote Internal Affairs. They developed that for me with Frank Mancuso Jr. was producing it. Gary Lucchese was the head of production at the time. And Frank Sr., who I'd become friendly with, who was like my godfather, really, to this day. He's like a second father to me. He came to the set and he said, "What are you doing in September?" Because I want to talk to Francis. I want you to play Vincent in the Godfather, the young. So I looked at him and I said, "Let me get back to you. Let me check my schedule. I'll get back to you." And he started laughing. And I said, "I'd be honored. Are you kidding me?" I said, "This is the reason why I wanted to become an actor, was to make movies like." It was those movies that made me make the leap into studying to become an actor, basically.
Sure.
Especially one, because it came out first. And that was the time I was coming out of high school and getting into college. And so it began, that was May, around May. The movie was going to start rehearsal in September. And it began the process. He started screen testing actors. Because obviously everybody wanted that, but who wouldn't want that part, And I didn't get to meet him until like August. I couldn't, I kept saying to my agent, why can't I just go screen test? if Francis, I think I became the actor that the studio wanted, like in Godfather 1,
Right. That he was resisting.
the studio.
Paramount wants him for the, right.
Yeah, so here comes the Paramount choice again. And he was probably, I don't know what Francis was thinking. I'm just thinking, meanwhile, the head of the studio wants me to do it, and that's like the worst recommendation you can possibly have.
Weird. Who else was testing, do you know?
Everybody, I'm sure, tested. Everybody tested for that part, I would imagine. Anybody who could be close to playing him probably tested. I mean, they tested a lot of people. Mickey tested, I think, also. But I knew Fred Roos, and he knew me. So Fred maybe said some things to Francis. But then I was on holiday, and they called and said, Francis would like to meet you, and I went and met with him. And it was a very nice meeting, just a personal thing. I remember he had one of those first laptops, IBM laptops. And we would talk a little bit, and he says, I saw your movie, The Untouchables, and I said, thank you very much. And I don't know if he mentioned anything else. And every time I would say something or something, he'd kind of nod and type some stuff into the computer and then come back up and spoke. And he was it was a beautiful meeting, no reading or anything. Thank you very much for coming in. And I left. And more people tested and went on. And now was Labor Day weekend coming up. And on a Thursday morning, I get a call from my agent, says, they want you on a plane to test tomorrow morning, Friday morning. So they made it, you had to do like a test deal. They made a deal. I got on the plane. I tested with Madeline Stowe, playing Mary. I finished. I was very comfortable. I was very proud of how it went. I was, I gave it all I got, and I felt good about it. And Fred Roos comes in the room and says, Francis would like you to stay for dinner.
His films have shaped the way America sees its justice system. Serpico, Guilty as Sin, The Verdict, Power, Q&A, Network. The legendary filmmaker whose vision has inspired a generation, Sidney Lumet. Now, one of the world's most acclaimed directors takes you inside the courtroom once again. Andy Garcia, Richard Dreyfuss. Night Falls on Manhattan.
That's a terrific film, Night Falls on Manhattan. I rewatched it recently.
Really?
It's got James Gandolfini. It's only a few years before The Sopranos, but he feels like an entirely different character actor,
He was a lovely guy, James, We rehearsed that movie for 2 weeks.
Yeah.
Twice a day, like a play. And when we shot the movie, I would say 97.5% of the movie was done in one take. Not that he picked take one take.
Right.
He had no monitors. He sat next to the camera, or stood, I should say, next to the
It just
lens.
looked like he was sitting since he was 5'2" or whatever.
Right, he just lay looking, next to the camera, looking right at you, and the take would be over, and he'd go, check the front. Good work. Okay, moving on.
Didn't you ever want another take though?
Yeah, sometimes I would ask.
And what would he?
First time I asked, he said, "Don't need it, kid." And I said, "Sidney, that was not, I'd like to take another shot." And he says, "Okay." So we did it, and he says, "You were right. Print that one." And walked away. And he was a character.
I spoke to Dreyfuss, or Richard Dreyfuss, about him, and he was very frustrated by that. He didn't. I don't think he cared for the experience. He wanted to do, and I know him now as an actor.
He wanted to play.
He wants to have fun doing it. He wants to keep trying stuff.
Well, you were expanding your drug empire, and I quote, one block at a time. Did you ever kill anybody?
Your Honor, I am instructing my client not to answer that question on the grounds of self-incrimination.
Are you pleading the Fifth Amendment, Mr. Washington?
Yes. Did you ever order anyone killed?
Same instructions, Your Honor.
Fifth Amendment.
When you were in jail for assault with a deadly weapon, did you ever kill anybody?
Fifth Amendment.
When your turf was firmly established and you were now numero uno, top dog, kingpin, MM, did you ever kill anybody? Did you ever order anybody?
Say enough of this. We'll ask questions and wait for responses in a civilized way.
Your Honor, the prosecutor is baiting my
Down,
client.
Mr. Vigoda. I'll run this courtroom with no help from you nor anyone.
But the rehearsal process, it was wide open, and if he saw something interesting, he'd say, "Mark that. That's it."
Right.
And he'd pick his angles. Sidney's movies have hardly any music in it, if any. And he could be in a wide shot in the scene. That's all he shoots. And then he'll come into two overs, which shoot simultaneous. You know, me and you talking right now. He'd have a camera on you and me, and one take, boom, we're out of here. He always, and if you read his book on directing, I read it before going to work with him. It's exactly what he did when, you know, and he starts the movie in a big wide shot exterior. And, you know, I got to the set. It was me pulling up in a taxi in front of the police station. You know, everybody was ready. The people were, it was on the boom. The camera operator was already on the, everybody was just waiting for me to show up on 8 o'clock set call. They were just waiting there like that. I show him on the set. He gives me a big kiss, several kisses, slobbers all over me every day. Wonderful mensch, you know.
Yeah.
And he said, "You remember where we got?" He goes, "Yeah, I got it." And he said, "Okay, let's go." Got in the cab, pulled up, walked up the stairways, cut, checked the front. Company move. Moved. You know, usually a company move is at lunch.
Yeah.
Company move at 8:10. Another part of the city. And he says he does that to set, like, this is how this is going to go.
Right.
This is D-Day, and we're wrapping at 3:30 every day, and we're going. And the funny thing was that Ron Liebman, who wonderful actor, he had this one 2-page monologue where he would rant and rage around the district attorney's table with all his assistant DAs.
Right.
And he's walking around there and just ranting and raging, as Ronnie can do very well. And
he called someone my Hebraic friend.
Yeah,
that scene, I was always stuck in my head. Yeah,
that was his adversary, and he spits coming out of his mouth. He's so angry, you know, and so he does his long take, and all the assistant district attorneys, me included, are sitting there just nodding our head. We don't say nothing. He's just going after this character played by Colin Fury, and he says. And then he finishes, and Sidney comes over and he says, "That was great, Ron. You want to go again?" And I went, "Did he just ask him actually to go again?" And I said, "That was curious. He's never asked me if I want to go again, you know, and I'm in every scene of this movie." And so I said, "Okay, let him go again. It's a long speech. It's fine. I don't care, you know." But I was just curious. So he did it, and then he did another take. Beautiful. Came over again. He goes, "That was great. You want to try another one?" And I'm going. So he does the third take, and then he comes again. He goes, "I'll do one more." And all of a sudden I stood up and I said, in the middle of the cab, I said, "Hold on, wait a second now, wait a second. Do you have to be a New York Jew to get an extra take in this movie?" And he said, "You got it, kid." And he walked away. But he was wonderful, man. He would every Friday. I was commuting. My kids were very young, and I was commuting from New York to LA for a good part of the movie until the Thanksgiving break came, which happened to be during the shooting. And then they came out. So he would say, "What's your reservation today?" And I go, "I got a 6:30 out of JFK." He goes, "Double book yourself on the 4 o'clock." Every Friday we say
and would he make it?
All the time.
Oh, that's crazy.
Yeah, because he wanted to go to the Hamptons, and you know, come 3 o'clock in the afternoon or whatever it was. You know.
That's funny. Yeah, there's a video. It's on the set, behind the scenes short of Dog Day Afternoon.
Oh, really?
You can find it on YouTube. I'll send it to you.
Oh.
It's crazy because he's literally jumping up and down through the crowd. He's got all the spectators outside the bank when Pacino's like first coming out,
Right.
and Charles Durning is trying to get him out. But you got to see like Lumet in action, and with a cigarette in his mouth at the same time. Like he's
Getting the crowd going.
Yeah, with a bullhorn,
Yeah.
like old school director with bullhorn,
Yeah.
and just like kicking the shit out of everyone. Listen to me, what's going on? Hurry up, get over here! Helicopters overhead, cops on the street. It's really madness. It's a wonderful.
And I'm sure Charles Durning is going, "I'm going to play the scene like that."
Probably, yeah. I mean, because they're probably feeding off that energy.
Oh,
yeah.
he was incredible. He was a real general. You know, it's like he was Patton, and we were just his soldiers, and let's go.
Right.
He was incredible. It was an incredible experience, and also we had great actors in the movie. You were mentioning Gandolfini also in it, you know, and Lena Olin and Ian Holm, who played my father, and he did a thing in the movie. I mean, James was such a wonderful actor. He was painfully shy.
Yeah.
Especially at that time, painfully shy. And we go out to lunch and stuff like that, and he would say, "I'm so nervous." He's so wonderful actor, such a great actor. And Ian Holm, there's a shot in the movie, I don't know if you remember this, where Ian, playing my father, is in a gurney with a bunch of tubes in him, so he's been shot, right? And I go visit him in the hospital, and he's got a camera looking down at him at the gurney, and one camera across him towards me, and I'm like Kilroy, with my hands on the gurney, sitting down talking to him. And we start playing the scene. So 2 cameras going, 1 take, the one that's in the movie. And we start playing the scene, and I say, I gotta go, Pop. And at the end of the thing, he said, I gotta go, Pop. And Ian improvises a line. And he just says to me, I love you, my son. And when he said that, it just floored me, I just lost it. And because I somehow didn't want him to see that I was losing it, I went down, my head, I took my head down, and so the camera is now looking just like at the top of my head for like 30 seconds or 60 seconds. I mean, it was quite a long period of time until I could gather myself, and then I come up and I say, I love you too, Pops, and I go, and I leave. And I guess I was crying and stuff. And if you watch the movie, I don't know if you remember, but if you watch the movie, when that happened, Sidney never cut away. He just stayed on the top of my head. He just stayed there with the camera. You could have shortened that and still got the effect of me coming back up. You could have cut back to the top shot and then come back to the thing. But once it happened, he just sat there.
He liked the truth of it. Yeah.
Yeah, because he said, why dilute it with a cut, Mm-hmm. And I mentioned that to Sidney. I said, I would say a majority of the people would try to shorten that, And he looked at me like saying, not me, kid.
Right.
I read a book, obviously my love for Cuba and its culture,
Sure.
its music, and the history of it. And I always thought that there was a movie very much using sort of stylistically an amalgamation of movies like Casablanca, The Godfather, and Cabaret. So you'd have sort of a cabaret owner, like Rick, and you'd have a family saga at the brink or during the transition, from Batista to Castro, and that family becomes a microcosm with what happened in the country and how sometimes brother turned against brother and people died, and at the end of the day, the protagonist goes into exile and basically rebuilds his culture where he is. And there's several lines that explain that in the movie, like Bill Murray, who plays sort of like the Cabaret Infante character, and he says, why not, you can't relive it, but you can rebuild it, Mm-hmm. And he does. The character sort of rebuilds his club in New York. And there's a beautiful line that he wrote saying, Inez Sastre, who's the impossible love in the movie, she's like the metaphor for Cuba. You can be with her. You can love her, but you can't be with her, Because if you be with her, then you have to transform. You have to succumb to what it's become. And so it's kind of a story of impossible love. When we have this discussion in exile, she comes to visit, and she's a member of the government there now. And she says, I know you don't believe in causes. And he says, I don't believe in lost causes, but I believe in lost cities. And that's my cause and my curse. So it's that kind of the thing. It's the conceit that the tragedy of exile is exile. You love people who cannot live in the country that they most cherish and most love because of the situation that country finds itself in, and it would be a tremendous compromise to give up your freedom to go live in that situation.
The last thing that he said to me before he died? He made me promise that if anything ever happened to him, I would take care of you. grown up in Havana all your life. And I bet there's parts of the city you don't know at all.
I'm sure you know them well.
Mm. Havana is very much like a rose. It has petals and it has thorns. So it depends on how you grab it. But in the end, it always grabs you.
And so I always thought that there was a movie there, and when I started to get an opportunity to get a little bit of attention as an actor, I approached Paramount and Frank Mancuso Sr., who was at the time, and I told him the idea, and he said, great, find a writer. And I had read this book by Infante, a couple of his books, one called Three Trapped Tigers, and A View of Dawn in the Tropics, which was an alternative title to the movie that I liked. And there were anecdotes and short stories about Havana in the 50s, which he lived, and wrote a lot about. And I went to visit him. He wasn't a prolific screenwriter, but he wrote Vanishing Point, and he wrote the first draft to Under the Volcano for Joseph Losey. But he was a film critic in Cuba. He started the Cuban Cinematheque. He was big. He wrote under a pseudonym named G. Cain, Cain, Cain. And a great critic. And so he liked the idea, and we began to work. And like I said, he delivered a 300-page first draft that he didn't want to cut.
Right.
So, there was a process, And that began. It began the journey, and it took me. But then nobody, Frank Sr. left, was no longer at Paramount, and I could never get anybody interested in the piece. It took me 16 years of my life to finally get someone to support it.
Yeah, because I saw it, I guess, 2005.
Yeah, that's when it was
came
released.
out, right?
Yeah, that's
which was before I knew you.
Yeah.
I wrote you a fan letter.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Oh, good.
Yeah, I'm still waiting for you to answer it.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Well,
no,
I was so surprised that I had a fan.
Yeah.
The great thing, I'm very proud of that movie, but I just remember that when I approached Bill Murray for it, he said, he said, we should work together. He goes, well, Bill, I have this project, and I said, I finally got the money, and there's a part in there that, you could be the greatest for and all that, and I'd be honored if you considered it, So he said, send it to me. So a couple of months go by, and he calls me on the phone, and he says, hello? He says, Andy Garcia? And I go, yes. He goes, Bill Murray. He goes, hey, Bill, how you doing? He says, I'm fine. I read your script. It's one of the most interesting scripts I've read in years. No one's going to see this movie, but I'd like to be in it.
Thank you.
and he came and showed up, and he was great. He was a prince.
Did you shoot it? You had to probably shoot him out fairly quickly, or?
Well, yeah. I concentrated his work. It was a couple of weeks. He had a ball. He went to the Dominican Republic. Bill. He was a prince to me, and he's great in the film. And the same with Dustin Hoffman, who came and played Meyer Lansky in a couple of days. I talked to Dustin, and he said, if I'm available, I'll do it, but only on one condition. And what? He says, you must come to my daughter's wedding.
Did you?
Yes. And we were shooting. It just so happened that his daughter's wedding ended up while we were shooting. So I flew back for the weekend from the Dominican Republic, went to his daughter's wedding, and then on Sunday, me and Dustin flew back and shot Monday, Tuesday, just me, him, and Bill, and we wrapped.
Right. You shot the film quickly.
35 days, yeah.
Yeah, and it's a 3-hour movie. Close.
Well, the first cut was 3 hours, but it ended up 220. Yeah. But yeah, it was a lot of material, yeah.
Yeah.
And a lot of dancing and shootouts, and we moved fast. We got lucky, the weather. As soon as we wrapped, within the next 2 days, there was like a typhoon came in through the Dominican Republic.
And was it independently financed the way we did our movie, like just pieced together with different
it was
foreign sales and equity?
No. It was financed strictly by one financier, Mr. Tom Gores, who was a patron to the cause.
Oh.
And his partner, Johnny Lopez, is Cuban-American also. And that was it. He just believed in me and the movie. And he was like I was sent for Cachao. He was sent, through his brother, Sam Gores, who was my agent at the time. And he just wanted to do it. He wanted to support it. He believed in it. And if not, the movie might still be struggling to get made.
Who distributed it?
Magnolia Pictures.
Magnolia, yeah.
Yeah. And Lionsgate International was the foreign sales.
How did you feel about how they did in terms of getting it out there?
Well, it was a platform release with the movie was seen mostly in their theater chain, which was about 350 chains. It was never really broke out further than that. There was limited funds to advertise it. But the movie has been seen all over the world, and to this day, people still talk to me about it. And
well, I think it's a movie that has legs, as they say, because it doesn't date. Obviously, it's very beautiful. It's an elegy, and the more interest develops in the subject, which is always getting more interesting, Cuba, to everyone. Yeah,
it's one of the few movies, if not the only one, that's really been done about that time period. First of all, outside of Cuba, that time period has probably only been done a couple times. Mm-hmm. I mean, the movie Havana was done by Sidney Pollack, but this comes from an American point of view of, it's like following an American character. I'm talking about following, Cubans in Cuba.
Right.
There's a movie by Gutierrez Alea, Memories of Underdevelopment, was done in Cuba just after the revolution. But very few, so that story is now, my son told me recently that he was told that they were seeing the movie, and a friend of his, who's 15 years old, my son, they watched the movie in school.
That's great.
Yeah, here in Los Angeles, a teacher said, "Oh, well, what's happening in Cuba? Let's look at this movie. Watch. It kind of tells you what went down."
Did you store up the music that you loved, knowing you were going to get a lot of it into a movie?
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Because I love doing that. I have songs in my head that I'm waiting to find a movie to pop them into.
Completely.
Right?
No, the reason why the movie exists is to showcase the movie, the music.
Right.
The music is a character in the piece, and in fact, the way it was designed, and this was also the idea when Guillermo Cabrera Infante, the writer, the great Cuban writer who's passed away, gave me the first draft, which was 300 pages long. He had musical annotations with lyrics in the draft that commented on the scene. You follow? So and that's what I was doing also, So it was like, and some of those songs that he wrote were in the movies, but the idea of that sustained itself. So if you listen to the music in The Lost City when you watch the movie, if you happen to know Spanish, you'll see that it's like a narrative. The music has a narrative voice in it. He's a character in the piece.
Yeah, it's all tied together.
And the lyrics,
strongly,
and also the lyrics. You might know the lyrics in the song. And sometimes they're just little. There's a character named, his nickname is Candela, played by Julio Oscar Mechoso, who's the villain, who's the Batista colonel, based on an actual person named Coronel Ventura, who was a harsh fixer for Batista. And in our movie, his name is Candela, which means fire. And I use a Chapotín song, a little like a soundbite, just like a thing, that the chorus says, "Tú no juegues conmigo, que yo como candela," which means that don't play with me, I eat fire. And so those kind of little things are inherent all through the movie. Mm-hmm. Sometimes in a longer format, which is the whole song, and other times just like little accents.
Did you clear all the music first?
Yes, of course. Yeah. There was a lot of money to clear.
But you knew going in exactly what songs you were going to be using.
A lot of them. Sometimes I substitute, but I had a whole grab bag. Plus, I had the stuff that I had been working with Cachao on the 4 albums we did were songs also that I was going to put in the movie. Like the movie ends in a rumba that was called Cuba Linda, Beautiful Cuba, and that's how and with a Jose Marti poetry, and I did all that already in the album. I just took it from the album and put it in the movie.
Right.
Yeah.
Cuba linda de mi vida, Cuba linda, siempre te recordaré. Cuba linda de mi vida, Cuba linda, siempre te recordaré.
We were supposed to go to New York for 1 week to shoot from the Dominican Republic, and as you know, when you move a new location, you have to have a crew prepping before you get there. There's quite an expense. And he said to me, if you could shoot New York in the Dominican Republic, you can figure that out for yourself. You'll save yourself somewhere between $600,000 and $800,000. Or it was like 600 or something. And you can take that to post. You can license the music you want, which you're short in the budget on licensing. If you had to reshoot something, you'd have a little money to do that. And especially when he said about the music, I said, okay, let me figure it out. and I rewrote the exile part. Not the scenes, I just restaged them.
Right.
I couldn't do a walk and talk in Central Park with me and Bill Murray and have Meyer Lansky pull up in an old limo and force me into the car and leave Bill Murray walking his little Shih Tzu with a bodyguard.
Right.
With Central Park West in the background. Beautiful scene, I couldn't do that. But I gave that up and staged it in the place where I worked.
How did the restaging...
Well, I staged it in Victor's Cafe where I was working,
Sure.
mopping floors and stuff like that. And it just became more intimate, The story beats were the same.
Yeah.
So instead of me going to see her at the plaza where she was staying, she surprised me at Victor's Cafe as I'm mopping the floors. Maybe the scene's even more poignant that way. Mm-hmm. But yeah, there were some things that I gave up. I shot New York with a camera from the top of a limo. I went to do a press for Oceans, one of the Oceans movies, 12 or 13, one of those. And when I got there, they picked me up at JFK, and I told the limo player, go up and down Park Avenue. And I got up with a camera and just shot.
And that's it, you got this.
Yeah. And I shot some, points of view of downtown. Then I went to the Jose Marti statue and shot that. And then, cut to a restaurant in New York, And I had some establishing shots of Manhattan. The hotel was in the Dominican Republic. We brought snow in there. We just made a movie.
Yeah,
movie magic, as they say.
Absolutely. It's a very malleable form. People don't, if they're interested in the story, they don't really notice how little it takes to set the stage.
But my favorite thing was that Valdemar Kalinowski was the production designer, who's fantastic. I first worked with him on Internal Affairs. I said, we found this corner in the banking district of Santo Domingo, in the capital. And because it's the banking district, a lot of the architecture is like Art Deco, and it's not Spanish colonial, because it was kind of built as a new republic, kind of newer, So we found this little corner. So I said to Valdemar, what if we put a subway exit across the street? I'll come out of the subway, stairs, and walk right into this hotel that's here. Towards camera, we'll put snow and some traffic and people on the street. It's in the middle of the night, like 3 a.m. I've come, from whatever, whether it be JFK, wherever I landed, and I got in a subway with my little valise, and that's all I have, right? And so I said, build the subway station in the stairs so it could be not see-through bars, but, solid. So because I'm going to be coming up the stairs. There's no real stairs there, just sidewalk.
Right.
So I did, what I had learned in, mime class in college, the old, coming out of a suitcase trick, And that's how I...
Okay, I got to see that again now. I got to watch that.
And it's just me crouching up like that, coming up. And it works, I've seen Bill Irwin do it a million times, So I said, we'll do that, and it plays,
Yeah, that's funny.
And the snow was there. We brought the snow, looked great, and it was just a transition, just to get you where he built this great hotel room that was really like coming to this dingy thing with a light bulb. It was great. So, at the end of the day, just tell the story,
Yeah.
You got to tell the story.
Well, you hang in with stuff. I mean, that's Lost City. You mentioned 13 years.
Oh, yeah.
I know you've been working on your Hemingway movie, which I wish you'd get to make already because I'm dying to see it.
I know. You have to hang in. There's no other, unless the studio says, well, can you want to start? I always think of that line that Sean Connery said in The Untouchables to Elliot Ness. He says, what are you prepared to do? You want to get Capone, what are you prepared to do? And I think that's every independent filmmaker is like, you want to make this movie, what are you prepared to do?
Thus ends part 2 of my conversation with my friend and collaborator, Andy Garcia. All interview material and audio clips are covered by the Fair Use Copyright Act of 1976, in which allowance is made for fair use for purposes such as criticism, comment, news reporting, teaching, scholarship, education, and research. You can follow me on Twitter at ReelRDEF, that's ReelRDEF. Please go to my blog, moviestildawn.blogspot.com, where I post all kinds of obscure and strange YouTube videos and basically make up for the time I lose on it every day by writing a few words about it. That's it for Movies Till Dawn. As my mother said, "Oh, Raymond, we're all getting too old for this."